Hello everyone, welcome to High on Paranormal. I'm Carlos, I'll be your host. And well, if you're listening to this, I want to thank you very much for clicking play, giving me a chance to tell you a few of the stories that I was able to gather. Let me get some things straight away. I am not a podcaster, but I love the paranormal, very interested in it, very curious and cautious. And so I thought a good way to start in getting involved in this subject more in depth, it would be to ask friends and families if they ever had any experience or anything that you can't really explain, but you just dismiss. And so I call it the $5 lottery ticket, where you win the lottery, but you only won $5 and you don't really care about it. So it happened, you dismissed it. It's like it never happened before. And we all have little sensations like that, some way more than others, more intense than others, and even mine. I got a few small situations, small experiences, but nothing to really brag about, or, well, there's nothing to brag about, or things like that, but to, you know, say or worth mentioning. So, in this case, I'm going to start my very first podcast with one of the stories that I have heard since I was very young, around 10 years old. And it happened to my brother. So we definitely believe that it happened basically because of the circumstances and everything else. Um, he calls it The Companion. I'm going to read it. I apologize, I forgot to translate it. So it's originally in Spanish. I'm just going to do a side translation and read it and spew it out in Spanish right away. So I apologize for any issues. I am really not good with editing and so on either. So, like I said, I'm not a podcaster. Now, before we start, why don't you go ahead, get your bowl, whatever you're smoking out of, and join me. I got my nice little bowl over here with some purple haze, and I hope you enjoy these stories. I definitely had a lot of fun getting them and getting them ready for the show, and did not realize how much work this really was, but it's very enjoyable. So I hope you enjoy it. And here we go. My story starts in a place called Maracaibo in Venezuela. And this is a coastal city where my grandmother's house was located in a very centric area of the city itself. Everything that I'm about to tell you started on a very early morning where I woke up all of a sudden for no reason whatsoever. I, started to feel like somebody was watching me. You know, that weird feeling that you feel when somebody is watching you. And that started to stress me. I was feeling very stressed out. I opened my eyes to see who was around, but, well, now, first, let me tell you, in my room, when the curtains are closed and everything gets so completely dark, not one little ray of light goes through. And across from my bed, at that moment, there used to be a piece of furniture, like a dresser, where it had some candles and images and stuff of different saints or virgins, kind of like an altar, which it was the one that my grandmother used to use to pray. On the left side of it, on the left side of my bed, there was the window. It went straight out into the street, and it had a lamp there. When the curtains were open, it would provide a lot of light from the street lamp. Now, to the right side of my bed, there was a rocking chair where my grandmother used to sit down and pray. And next to that rocking chair, there was the door to the room so that you can come in and out. Now, with all this said, this became the part where I open my eyes, and the first thing that I see is the altar with all the candles still lit like it used to be. But then I realized the rocking chair is making a noise. It's making a sound. It's the same sound that it makes whenever my grandmother is rocking back and forth and praying. So that gets my attention, and I turn around to see why is that rocking chair making the sound. And to my surprise and shock, and I mean shock, because it wasn't fear, it was to see somebody, or better, more like the silhouette drawn out by the light of the candles, that allow me to see somebody sitting, rocking on the rocking chair, going back and forth. Now, immediately I recognize such silhouette, that figure by the shadows, as one just like the one from my younger brother, who, to my bigger shock, he didn't even live in the same house, and much less even the same city. Like, I sit up on my bed and I start questioning myself in my mind, like, well, and then out loud, Carlos, what are you doing here? When did you guys arrive to Maracaibo? But he wouldn't say anything, and much less turn around or look at me. And so I went ahead and I insisted, hey, what are you doing here? When did you guys arrive? But he didn't answer. And again, he didn't turn to look at me. At that time, and at that moment, everything turned kind of chill, like cold and heavy. The silhouette, I started to see it like darker and darker, and that's when I started to get like a feeling of fear, for which that took me to then just lay down, cover my eyes with a blanket, like, creating some fake sense of protection as a child. And so after that moment where I just cover under the blanket like when I was a kid, now keep in mind, I'm 18 at this point, or I think I'm 18, 17. And after a moment, which I don't know how long, my body started to feel like the temperature was getting lower, and I started to get cold. And so at that moment, I started to hear how the chair was no longer moving. It had stopped. And then it starts to laugh. First, in a soft manner, later on, little by little, raising the intensity and tone. When I was starting to hear it, to listen, and hearing that, it's kind of like a mocking laugh. And so it really terrified me. My mind was telling me to get up, to just jump over the rocking chair, open the door, and just take out running from the room, asking for help and screaming for help. But I decided that what I was going to do at that moment, to get my escape going with a good result, but my body was completely disconnected from my mind. It had no response whatsoever. It was like if I was in a vegetative state. That's where the fear really took over me, and I started to sweat at the same time that I was feeling cold. And, for my bigger suffering, those seconds, they were ticking by like hours. All of a sudden, the laughter stopped, and through the sheet, I can see right to my right side, as I'm looking, the silhouette approaching, and it turns around to look at me. And I don't know how, but as I was able to, I lower my sheets all the way down to the bottom of my eyes. And when I saw that, what I thought to be my brother's face, with his eyes looking straight onto my face, but instead it wasn't his face. It was this wrinkly, macabre, kind of like the leprechauns that you see in the movies. At that moment, it gets up from the rocking chair, and I quickly go ahead and put the blankets over my face again, the sheets, and then the silhouette gets to the side of my bed. It leans over and it approaches his face to mine. Well, that's why I went back to the original plan, or jumping from my bed and to run away, but once again, my body failed me. I was completely petrified. And at that moment, that was when, well, I get goosebumps saying it, but that's when his face get right against the sheet, right against my face. And he started to have this deep breathing right on top of me. And he started to call me by my name. That right there was a moment that I had to react, and that's how finally and thankfully it happened. That's the moment that I was able to get the sheets from me, off of me. I started to get on, like to stand up on the bed and to just jump. I jumped so high and so long that it was able to take me all the way to the door, which I opened. And as I had planned, I just started screaming for my grandmother and for anybody else to just get up, and because I was desperate. She came out like horrified from her room to try to find out what's going on, but nothing. I ended up calling, after all of this, I ended up calling my mom so I could tell her what happened. I couldn't sleep in that room for days afterwards. This has been the most horrifying experience that I have ever had within the paranormal. Had a few other ones, but this is by far the worst. Now, I have to be honest. When I first read the story, the full story as he sent it to me, compared to the memories that I had of what I've heard, I actually got goosebumps. So, like, because being in the room and knowing the entire setup of it is just crazy, especially since many of the things ended up happening in that house. Very simple and, you know, even bigger ones. All right. I think in this one, I'm going to share one of my stories. It's a very short one. It would be like a good in between. So I'm going to share one which I've heard of this happening before in other podcasts and paranormal TV shows and whatnot, of being able to see somebody, but like their spirit or whatever, their image. I don't know how to call it, but when you're so sure that you saw somebody and that somebody is still alive, it's not like they're dead and their ghost and spirit is there. They're still alive. So that's one of those that, well, no, I must have been wrong when I saw it. But the weird thing is that, it wasn't just me. Like, I was literally on the phone with my mom when it happened. And that's how I know that it actually happened. And that what I saw is what I saw. So let me tell you about it. Okay, so my experience was at my grandmother's house, same house my brother's talking about in his story. Now imagine a T. The bottom end of the T, it's the dining room area where the phone is. The middle part of the T base itself, it's like the TV area, living room. And then the top of the T is the center of my room. The right side, it's my brother's room. And on the left side, it's my grandparents' room. My niece was sitting or laying down in my grandfather's hammock in his room because she had a broken toe or something like that. I'm talking on the phone to my mom, and you can see that entire area from the phone area. So I could see somebody walking from any room to another. After a while, 5, 10 minutes of talking to my mom on the phone, I see my niece walk from my grandparents' room to her room. I try to call out to her, "Hey, Amanda, Amanda," but nothing. So I was just waiting for her to come back around so that she could come to the phone, say hello to my mom, and all of that. She never did. So, like another 5, 10 minutes, we hang up the call, and I go into my brother's room to, you know, see what's holding her. Hey, Abuela wanted to talk to you. Abuela is grandma in English. And so, but she wasn't there. So I go back to my grandfather's bedroom because I must have missed her when she went back. And I ask her, but she tells me that she never left the room, that she has been laying there the whole time because her foot hurt too much to walk around. So I didn't really mention anything, but, at the time, to anybody, I think. But it's always been in the back of my mind. It's not big enough to make a deal out of it or to share like that because it sounds like you just, you know, saw something that wasn't there. Especially for the fact that she's not even dead, thankfully, you know? Usually you only see like dead people or so. And that's the part that I've heard some stories about situations like that of seeing people who are actually alive. I just don't know much about it. I would love to learn more and find out more. Anyway, our next story comes from a friend of mine back in Venezuela. We actually knew each other in this small town where I used to live. It's a coastal town. Same lake that it goes from my city in Maracaibo, but all the way on the opposite side. And so that was, now to give you an idea of the area. This location back in the 1500s was one of the first places to be settled in the country by the Spaniards. Many attacks of pirates back in the day for raids and massacres and all kinds of stuff used to happen. A lot of slave trade and so on. So throughout many years, there has been, a lot of incidents. Plus, it's a very religious community where, we have parties over there. For New Year's Eve, they go for till the next morning, and it's all religious parties. So, yeah, get an idea. Now, with all of that, this place is loaded with history, and it has a pier. I believe at this point that pier is no longer available. I believe it's just decay, lack of maintenance, and so on. But this is just to give you an idea of where we are. If you're thinking, if you've ever seen one of those Corona commercials, palm trees laying down and the whole thing, this is it. In fact, I'm going to post some pictures onto the group along with the post. That way, you guys, if you want to, you can go take a look at it and have an idea of what it looked like in its prime and even after its prime and as it looks now. Completely gone, basically. So, without further ado, here is Don't Play the Ouija Board. So, this was submitted by Margarita. Margarita is a friend of mine that I have known for about 20 years, a little bit more. We definitely actually went to this pier many times ourselves. Never played the Ouija. But this is what she wrote. It was a normal night in the village of Cajasec. Some friends who were visiting the town came looking for me as everything's always so quiet. We decided to go around and I will show them around since, I was very familiar with the area. That night we went to several places: Bubures, Palmarito, and Gibraltar. And since we live in a coastal area and there are several beach areas, Gibraltar has appeared at the beginning of the beach area, in one of the first areas where the settlers first arrived. On that pier, where everything was very dark, the moon was shining like a lamp. We were about a group of 6, boys and girls. And after 11 o'clock at night, well, like all young people looking for ways to entertain themselves, we decided that it was a good thing to play the Ouija. Okay, so one of the girls, who I call Maria, not her real name, told us that she played with a table, with a board, and knew how to use it. So we decided to play the Ouija at the end of the pier. And, you know, everything would be more scary, perfect for that type of games. So we followed Maria's instruction and made a circle on the floor of the dock and of the pier. We held hands and began saying the respective things for the board in the middle of the circle, and everyone with their eyes closed. Now, I do have to say, originally I did not want to do this. I have always been very cowardly, and at the beginning I said I would not play, but they insisted. So, aside from that, I was thinking that it could be worse, not to play, see it from the outside with all those spectrums and entities and stuff. So, I convinced myself and played. As we were all already holding hands, Maria asked if anyone was present. And at that moment, we began to feel that the boards of the dogs were moving, and I could not believe it. Now, it could have also been the waves, but the lake was pretty calm and we didn't have any waves going on. Either way, I swore it was also, one of my friends making a joke. And so I opened my eyes and I saw that they were all there. They were all still holding hands, and that everybody had their eyes closed. Even worse, the boards of the dock kept on moving. And at that moment, I felt really frightened. I did not hesitate to let go of everybody else's hands on the circle, and I ran to the car. I picked up, I panicked, and I just said, "Take me home. I don't want to be here." I told them the same thing a couple of times, but eventually Maria approached me and told me that we had to close the portal so that she could get rid of the entity that had come through. But I refused. And that's when it all started. They tried to calm me down and took me home, which by that time was already past 12 at midnight. And so when I got home, I did not want to sleep alone. So I laid down next to my mother, and since that date, I could not sleep for the next 2 months, I believe. At the beginning, we spent about 15 to 20 days with this torment in non-stopping, unrelenting, each day just getting a little bit stronger than the day before. Something was talking to me on my pillow. Something wouldn't let me sleep. I heard murmurs when I slept with my head on the side of the pillow. And although I could not understand what he was saying, I had other things happen, like the bed moving, as well as the pillows. We heard footsteps, shadows coming into the bathroom, and the doors closing by themselves. I think we went to church and things like that, but it didn't help. That's when my mom asked me if I had done something or played something I shouldn't have. So I let her know about our Ouija game. After I said that, my mom decided to send me to where my sister was in Valera. Valera is a city in the mountains. That's about an hour from Caja Seca. And this was to see if something would change since I had lost a lot of weight and was not doing well. I mean, I weighed about 45 kilos. I looked like a stick. And it was not well. I mean, a few people believe me. Only the people who slept with me would be the ones to believe me, because they also felt the same things. And once I left my mom's house and went to my sister, well, then my mom was able to sleep with no problems with that entity that it was with us now. But it seems to have come with me to my sister's house. Now, my sister lived in a women's only residence. There were about 5 women living there in total, and to get to the residence, you had to climb some stairs to get to the house. Going to another city with my sister did not help. because after I arrived, we began to feel this presence, and now it was the two of us who could not sleep. Every morning, it sounded like somebody would walk up and down the stairs of the residence with chains. I saw its shadow. It moved the bed once again. I mean, walking steps. They sounded very loud with unintelligible voices. And worst of all, I felt like he touched me, like he touched between my legs, and well, that did scare me a lot. I felt violated and helpless. All this happening in the middle of the night when everyone was asleep. The sequence of events were driving me crazy, but it was real. My sister heard it too. After 2 months, we went to visit a priest. And he helped, but sadly, not much. He told me to pray and to put some holy water on me, so I did. And that actually gave me the chance to be able to have a good night's sleep for about a night or two. But by the third night, it all had started once again. And we kept hearing things every so often. Then we went to a woman, and she was able to get rid of it. Apparently, the entity that stuck to me was a man who, when I broke the chain of the game, it stayed with me. He was a big black man, and he was the one who was bothering me. Of course, I bothered him first, so I think it's understandable. Apparently, this entity was attracted to me. So this lady advised me to dress in men's clothes. They are not too effeminate, and to do that for a few weeks. And so that way it would confuse the entity. I was also advised about what kind of prayers to pray, which she did for me, as well as sage. And I did this to the point of even wearing men's cologne for a few weeks. Little by little, it actually seemed to work. We no longer see, hear, or feel him. After about 4 weeks or so, it was completely gone. After that, I never played that game again, not even by chance. I have a lot of respect for all that, and I don't wish those 2 months of terror on anyone. Sometime later, I actually discovered that Gibraltar was one of the first ports where the Spanish arrived, where there was a lot of slavery and slaughter of people of color. I hope you enjoyed my story. Now, this story, it's totally new to me. This one, I actually wasn't expecting to get anything from Margarita. And in fact, I got two. And I'm using, I would say, the least impactful of the two that you sent me. And so I I mean the fact that I've been to the same pier so many times when it was up and running, and being able to, you know, compare, because when I was there, there were a few things, a couple of times that happened, but something so tiny that, not even like the story that I was telling with my niece. So, but that area, there are stories about spirits that appear in a chimbangele, which is a traditional dance for one of the saints, the one I was saying earlier in the episode that it celebrated on December 31st, and a few other days throughout the year. But this one, I really like this story, especially since, you know, not only provides a story itself, but it actually provides some kind of way to be able to deal with it. I mean, look at it in this way. In this way, it was attraction. The spirit was having an attraction towards her. So whether it is because he's looking for our energy, or, anything like that, or just because they want to be by us or with us. So that's very freaky and interesting at the same time. Thankfully, she was able to get rid of that pretty easily. Well, not pretty easily, but, quick enough and easy enough. It could have been a lot worse, obviously. So thank you so much, Margarita. And well, that is it for our show today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you do, please don't forget to subscribe. You can always follow us on Facebook or on Instagram or Twitter. New parents for the, sorry, I'm giving you my other podcast. This one is High on Paranormal, or HOP. But if you just search High on Paranormal on any of them, you will be able to find it, or you can email us at highonparanormal@gmail.com. There's also a Spanish version of it if you know anybody who might like it, but they would prefer to have it in Spanish as the first language. I'm going to be releasing a Spanish version as well. Just ran out of time today. Happy Halloween, everyone. Thank you for joining me. And one last thing. This episode and this program, this podcast, gets sponsored by Agira Language Services. It's an interpreting, translating, and transcribing company based in upstate New York, in Rochester. And quality and customer service is their priority. I know, because I am Agira Language Services. So we always look to be able to provide you with the best service possible, any time of day or night. So just give us a call, email us. Doesn't matter where you are, we will be able to assist you via video, telephonic, and always with the ability to do simultaneous interpretations. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. I hope you had a good buzz and that I didn't ruin it for you. Have a good one.